The cold December morning in 2013 began with an unusual commotion on Elm Street in the town of Rockland, Maine. 6 state police cars, sirens off, quietly pulled up in front of a 2-story wooden house shrouded in thick sea fog. Neighbors peeked through curtains, trying to peer through the snow as tactical-clad officers fanned out, surrounding the area. Inside, Jack Thorne, 61 years old, the former sheriff, once regarded as a symbol of honor in this coastal community, was preparing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained since leaving the force nearly a decade earlier. The insistent knocking came at 5:31 a.m. Jack Thorne, Maine State Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1979 disappearance of Lisa Montrose." The officers later recounted that his hand trembled slightly as he set down the coffee mug, but his face remained eerily calm, as if he had been waiting for that moment for 34 years. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Camden, Maine, night of December 27, 1979. Snow had started falling in the afternoon. Large white flakes blanketing the harbor, dim yellow lights reflecting off the black water. At the end of Harbor Street, Fisherman's Wharf Bar was still lit up. The staff Christmas party had just ended. In the corner of the bar, Lisa Montrose, 19, a sophomore at the University of Maine, was putting on her brown coat and wrapping a red wool scarf, waving goodbye to her coworkers. "I'm heading out. See you tomorrow," she said, her voice cheerful but tired. Outside, the sea wind blew hard, wooden doors rattling. The wall clock read 10:45 p.m. The last bartender saw her crossing the street, her small figure blending into the hazy snow, heading toward the wooden bridge leading to the Bayside homes. Camden was a quiet port town back then, with fewer than 5,000 residents. After tourist season, the harbor echoed only with waves lapping and distant foghorns. The path Lisa took was less than a mile from the bar to home. Just 10 minutes, but in the cold wind and darkness, no one saw her again. By midnight, the snow fell heavier, covering the entire bridge, turning every trace into a silent white blanket. The next morning, early light streamed through the Montrose family's window, reflecting off the still-made bed. The coffee cup her mother had brewed the night before sat untouched on the table. Lisa's bicycle stood propped on the porch, its seat blanketed in thick snow. Mrs. Montrose thought her daughter had stayed over at a friend's, but by late morning, no one in her circle knew where Lisa was. Calling Fisherman's Wharf, the manager said, "She left the bar last night, walked home." A chill ran down the mother's spine. By 6:30 a.m., after calling everywhere with no news, she picked up the phone, her hand shaking as she dialed the town police station. "My daughter never stays out overnight," she told the desk sergeant. "Something's happened." The on-duty officer noted every detail: name, age, address, last known sighting. Outside, the snow continued falling quietly. No one knew that very night, Camden would begin its most haunting disappearance in history. The next morning, December 28, 1979, the sky was overcast and bitterly cold. The snowstorm had stopped, but the ground was a thick, silent, white expanse, as if untouched. Mrs. Montrose woke early, passed her daughter's room, and paused at the half-open door. The bed was still made, the blanket neatly folded from the day before, the cocoa cup on the table cold. Unease spread through her. Lisa had never stayed out overnight without calling ahead. She threw on a coat, stepped onto the porch, gazed at the empty street shrouded in snow fog, then went back inside to call the town police. Lieutenant Harold Greeley, on duty that morning, took the call at 6:32 a.m. The woman's voice on the line trembled, breaking. "My daughter, Lisa Montrose. She didn't come home last night." Just half an hour later, a police jeep turned onto Harbor Drive, its tires crunching through the snow with a long hiss. 3 officers and a few civilian volunteers were mobilized. They started from the last place Lisa was seen, Fisherman's Wharf by the harbor. The path from the bar to home was just over a mile, but that morning it felt endless. No footprints, no tire tracks, just a streaked white ribbon between snow-covered pines. When they reached the wooden bridge over the Penobscot River branch, the sun was weakly rising. Cold wind howled from the bay, whipping the planks with creaks. The young officer leaned over the railing, where something had fluttered up from the thin ice. He gently brushed away snow, a red wool scarf, fibers stiffened, stained with a dark brown streak. Greeley immediately signaled to photograph the scene. The scarf was placed in a paper bag, tagged 341A. No one said a word, only the soft waves and wind whistling through the wood slats. About an hour later, they found a bright brown Sears shoe wedged under a riverbank ice chunk about 20 meters from the bridge. Minutes later, while scraping snow for footprints, a volunteer spotted a keychain peeking from under the ice, the metal ring holding a plastic tag reading Lisa Montrose. Everyone stood silent, realizing this was no longer a runaway overnight case. By noon, divers were called in with air tanks and cables. They drilled through the ice under the bridge, but the frigid water and strong current made visibility near zero. After 2 hours, they had to stop. If she fell in, the current would carry her far, one diver said, his breath turning to white vapor in the wind. As dusk fell, Greeley reviewed the scene sketch, connecting small X marks on the snow, scarf position, shoe, keychain, all aligned in the wind's direction. He closed the notebook, voice low, could be an accident. She slipped and fell in the water. But even he didn't believe his own words. By day's end, the search team withdrew as fog rolled in. A preliminary report was hastily typed on thin paper, the last line stating, possible accident fall into river. Continue search when weather permits. As the bridge lights came on, snow began falling again, covering the fresh footprints left behind. Camden returned to its quiet, but in everyone's hearts, especially Mrs. Montrose's, a fear they dared not name had begun to flicker. As night fell on the second day of searching in Camden, the snow had stopped, revealing patchy mud along the bridge edges. Early the next morning, December 29th, the investigative team returned to the scene for a detailed survey. Lieutenant Harold Greeley brought a Polaroid camera, measuring tape and notebook, beginning a hand-drawn map of each evidence location. He carefully measured the distance from the bridge railing to where Lisa's shoe was found, marking it on the paper map. In the middle of the bridge, where the red wool scarf had been picked up the day before, they staked a small wooden post painted with a red number 1. No caution tape, no cameras, just a few booted officers wading through snow, breath steaming in the bone-chilling morning. Each piece of evidence was photographed with Polaroid, the images developing in Greeley's hands, small objects emerging against the white snow backdrop. He taped them into the case file, noting in blue ink, red wool scarf, blood stain 4 centimeters wide, right shoe, found 20 m from bridge. Keys west side of bridge. That was all they had. As the group moved to the dirt path leading to the bridge, a young officer bent down and called back. Tire tracks here. Under thin ice, 2 deep grooves etched in the mud, nearly parallel. They measured the distance between the ruts was 1.62 meters, matching a small pickup truck. Greeley scraped away snow with a knife, clearly seeing the tire tread pattern, then frowned slightly. Goodyear extra grip line, rare, only a few in the area have it. He carefully sketched the tread into his notebook. The tracks ran straight to the bridge edge, then turned around, the left front tire slipping slightly, suggesting a sudden stop before leaving. When they returned to the station, Greeley requested a check of pickup truck registrations in Knox County. Within 10 miles of the area, only 8 matched the size, but just one had Goodyear extra grip tires, a dark green pickup, plate ME241, registered to Jack Thorne, Camden Town police officer. The information stunned the team for a few seconds. Thorne was known to everyone, a discharged Marine on the force 8 years, rated dedicated and mild-mannered, no priors. Greeley looked at the registration, saying nothing. He decided to question him directly. That afternoon, In a small office at police headquarters, Thorne sat behind the desk, arms crossed. Greeley placed the file in front of him. December 27th night. Were you on duty? Yes, but I left the station early. My truck broke down. Had to call for a ride. Who was it? A friend from Rockland. He drove over around midnight. Name? I don't remember exactly. Ken or Kevin something. Greeley silently took notes. Thorne's voice was calm, unflinching, but his eyes darted when mentioning the time he left the station. The next morning, police inspected Thorne's truck at the station's rear garage. No obvious damage. Engine started on the first try. They checked the tires. Goodyear Extra Grip, rare model. Perfect match to the scene impressions. Greeley ordered photos and serial numbers recorded from the tires. However, with no blood, hair, or fibers, he knew he couldn't charge yet. A witness named Martha Keene, living in a wooden house across the bay, was interviewed. She said, "That night, I heard a vehicle cross the bridge around 11. I looked out the window, saw yellow headlights, dark body, maybe dark green, but I didn't see anyone." She paused, then added hesitantly, "I thought it was a police patrol." Martha's info unsettled Greeley. Everything pointed one way, but nothing solid enough to prove. No fingerprints, no direct witnesses, no body. The preliminary report to the Knox County prosecutor. Insufficient evidence to establish criminal activity. That night, Greeley sat alone in his office, hand-drawn scene sketch before him. Polaroids scattered on the desk. Tire tracks, red scarf, shoe, keys, each piece hinting at something bigger, but missing the center. He folded the notebook, sighed. Outside, wind rose again, rattling the foggy window. A disappearance, a suspected cop, and no evidence strong enough for a criminal probe. The wooden bridge where Lisa vanished sank back into darkness, swallowing every answer. A week later, early January, 1980, Camden warmed slightly. Snow began melting along the harbor, exposing soggy earth and the musty salt smell from decaying moss. A civilian search team, local fishermen and port residents, continued combing the area around the wooden bridge, hoping for more traces of the missing girl. They followed the remaining mud strip by the water's edge, where snow was thinner, staking markers for every square meter covered. That morning, a man named Paul Kitteridge, owner of a small boat, bent down by a low thorn bush and shouted. Greeley and two officers ran over. Under dry leaves was a gray fabric scrap, frayed and torn, stuck with dried brown substance. Greeley picked it up with tweezers, bagging it in paper. He recognized it as coarse cotton, possibly from a shirt or pants. A few steps away, faint sunlight caught a hair snagged on a branch. Light blonde, about 15 centimeters long, wrapped tight around the twig, as if wind-blown but taut. Someone had passed very close. Everything was carefully collected and taken to the station. The Knox County Forensics Room, a small basement space in the old courthouse, conducted preliminary tests. The report stated, substance on fabric is blood, type O+. Victim Lisa Montrose, blood, type O+. No absolute confirmation, but the match reignited suspicion. The hair was microscopically compared, same blonde shade, length, and strand diameter as Lisa's from her student ID photo. Greeley read the results, silent for a long time. The next day, he ordered a re-inspection of Jack Thorne's truck, the man still reporting to work normally, showing no worry. On January 5 noon, checking the dark green pickup's bed, police found a black leather jacket neatly folded in a bag behind the seat. On the right cuff, a dark red stain, finger-sized. Greeley held it up, light gleaming through the leather, the stain shimmering. "What's this?" he asked. Thorne didn't look up, replying quickly. "Old paint. I repainted the fence last week." His voice was so steady it was hard to read. The jacket was sealed and rushed to Bangor Forensics. 3 days later, results arrived. Stain is human blood, type O+. No DNA tech, no way to prove whose. Final conclusion brief. Source undetermined. Unidentified human blood. Greeley sat in his small office, the cold report on the desk. Everything seemed to point the same way: red scarf, tire tracks, witness seeing green truck, now bloodied jacket. But no piece connected into a chain, no body, no direct witnesses, no fingerprints. The Knox County prosecutor, reviewing the file, shook his head. Can't charge. Could be accident, could be coincidence. Meanwhile, Thorne kept showing up at the station, doing routine work. To colleagues, he was calm, even leading 2 more searches in January. When asked, he just said, "We have to find her. Poor girl." No one dared press further. By month's end, weather turned cold again. River ice thickened, burying the bridge area under hard frost. Searches halted indefinitely. In internal files, Greeley wrote a short summary. Case remains open. Missing person with suspicious evidence. The file was numbered, Camden 79, 341, and locked in the evidence room's steel cabinet. As he locked his office that day, wind rose outside the window, rattling the panes. The bridge where Lisa vanished lay silent in snow. Evidence just enough to suspect, but too little to prove anything. The case closed provisionally, leaving only silence and an unfinished feeling, like snow still falling on the unmelted bay from that fateful night. February 1980, snow had stopped. Camden's harbor still gray and frigid. Winter winds blew along Harbor Street, sweeping the wooden bridge where searches had ceased weeks before. In the small police station office, Lieutenant Harold Greeley sat at his desk, stacking reports and forensics logs. On the thick file cover nearing 200 pages, he wrote the final line in blue ink: "Insufficient evidence to charge." The report was numbered, Camden 79, 341. Inside, evidence listed briefly: red wool scarf, blood-stained sample 341A, black leather jacket, human blood, type O+, sample 341B, gray fabric scrap, long blonde hair, sample 341C. Each bag resealed with wax, labeled with dates, and Greeley's signature. He gazed out the foggy window, the bay iced over, wind whistling past wooden roofs. The case had never gone anywhere, and now it had to close as administrative procedure. On February 10th, the Knox County prosecutor reviewed it. After reading everything, he said curtly, "No body, no witnesses, no DNA. We can't keep this open forever." Greeley didn't argue. He knew he'd done his best. The next morning, evidence bags were loaded onto a truck, resealed in a steel crate, shipped to the Maine State Archive in Bangor, where hundreds of unsolved cases waited. The driver signed the handover, noting Montrose, Lisa, missing person. In the duty log, Greeley added one line before closing it: "No suspect charged." That afternoon, he visited the wooden bridge one last time. Fresh thin snow from overnight had covered it, old marker stakes gone. From where Lisa vanished, looking out, the iced water reflected silvery light. He stood minutes, then turned away, knowing the file would lie dormant in storage, perhaps forever. In Camden, life resumed its rhythm. Press stopped mentioning the missing girl, residents busy with new fishing season. The Montrose home locked up earlier each night, Lisa's room light no longer on. Her mother often stepped onto the porch, gazing toward the bridge, now just wind and creaking wood. The Montrose case became a faint scar in the town's memory, a story without an ending. In Bangor's steel cabinets, evidence bags lay side by side, sealing paper yellowing over years. The label still bore the scrawled handwriting, Camden 79, 341, missing person with suspicious evidence. No one at the police station knew that 33 years later, those very evidence items, ordinary forgotten objects in the dark, would be reopened, telling the rest of the story that began on a snowy night in Maine. In the years that followed, Lisa Montrose's disappearance faded into silence. In Camden, life returned to its daily beat, as if winter 1979 had left no crack. Faded old newspaper clippings were folded away in storage drawers, and Lisa's smiling photo in her student uniform stayed only on a small altar in her mother's living room. Officer Harold Greeley transferred to Portland, retiring in 1988. Asked about the Montrose case, he just shook his head. Nothing new to say, just a girl who never came back. For over 3 decades, file number Camden 79, 341 went untouched. It sat in Maine's old Bangor archive, amid hundreds of unsolved disappearances, murders, and mysteries stacked in long rows. Dust thickened on steel crates, labels fading with time. Sometimes in winter, low temperatures hardened the wax seals, metal cracking like the past's breath. In 1995, Maine completed a modern crime archive, a new facility with temperature, humidity control, and specialized plastic storage. Oldest files were transferred. In the handover list, line 147 read, Case #79, 341, Montrose, Lisa. Missing person. Evidence sealed, on inspection, evidence bags intact, red wool scarf, leather jacket, hair, gray fabric. Greeley's seal, scrawled blue ink signature, still crisp. They added new barcodes, placing the box in aisle 4, row B12, bottom shelf. No one thought these items would matter again. In the 1990s, DNA tech emerged for cold cases in many states, but tiny Maine lacked funds for a dedicated lab. By 2003, the state DNA ID program launched, prioritizing recent murders. Montrose file, classified missing person, wasn't reviewed. It slumbered among hundreds of others. Meanwhile, Jack Thorne, the sole uncharged suspect, stayed in Maine. He served until 2005, retiring as lieutenant. He moved to Rockland, 20 miles from Camden, opening a small boat repair shop. To locals, he was honesty and dedication personified. Holidays brought local paper stories on the ex-officer who devoted his life to community. No one mentioned Lisa Montrose to new generations. Her name was just a faint tale mothers told during blizzards. Back then, a girl crossed the bridge and never returned. Early 2013, Maine DOJ launched a new program. Cold Case Initiative, reviewing unsolved crimes, partnering state police, forensics, and FBI. Goal: reopen 10 promising cases with recoverable biologics. Tech scanned old lists, prioritizing sealed evidence. Amid hundreds, one name caught forensics' eye: Montrose, Lisa. Missing person, 1979. Archive reports noted blood samples type O plus matching victim, evidence well preserved. Crucially, seals unbroken since 1980. Rare. If any DNA survived 30 years, it could be there, the forensics chief said in a meeting. On January 15, 2013, the file reopening order was signed. The steel crate shipped from Bangor to Augusta analysis under 2 state troopers' watch. Greeley's original seal cut after 34 years. Inside, faded red wool scarf with black stitched dried blood, black leather jacket, hair and fabric, in new plastic bags. On the opening log, signer was Detective Rachel Kearney, youngest cold case squad member. She handwrote at page bottom, case reopened, possible DNA retrieval. Priority level 1. No one in the room knew opening that small steel box would stir a undercurrent, buried in Camden's memory for over 3 decades. A disappearance thought dead with 1979 winter was about to resurface, bringing answers no one in town was ready to hear. When the Montrose crate was placed on the glass table in Augusta's cold case squad office, Detective Rachel Kearney stood silent seconds. Youngest in the unit, 32, she was known for reading and recalling details. On the lid, the old brown seal bore Lieutenant Harold Greeley's scrawled blue ink signature, lead investigator in 1979. 34 years on, it looked freshly signed. Kearney touched the cover, feeling chill. Someone vanished in the snow, and now we owe her answers, she whispered. In early February 2013, Kearney spent nearly a week reading the full original file. Paper yellowed, musty with old ink and damp. Polaroids taped loosely, peeling, snowy scenes, bloodied red scarf, shoe teetering on ice edge. Handwritten reports, scene sketches, evidence locations, Witness statements. Jack Thorne interrogation. She reread blood descriptions on jacket and scarf. Human blood type O+. Source undetermined. No DNA, just blood type. 1979 text limit. But now it was different. Carney red-circled two phrases, blood stain on scarf and blood residue on leather jacket. Below, she handwrote priority for STR DNA test. Maine State Crime Lab used STR short tandem repeat. Since 2009, reading short gene segments in decades-old dried blood. If DNA intact even in trace molecules, they could recover identity. Odds slim, but to Carney, it was the only lead. She opened a small unit meeting. On the whiteboard, she wrote 3 timelines: 1979, disappearance; 1980, case closed; 2013, reopened. We don't have a body, but we have perfectly preserved evidence, she said. If the DNA is still there, it will tell the rest of the story they couldn't back then. On February 18th, Carney and forensics technician Peter McNally went to the Maine DOJ storage to oversee the seal breaking. The room was kept at 10 degrees C, with a faint smell of metal and old plastic. The Camden 79, 341 steel crate was placed on a stainless steel table. Peter carefully cut the wax seal with a knife, then recorded each step with a video camera. When the lid popped open, cold air wafted out, carrying the scent of old paper and damp leather. Inside were 3 evidence bags. Bag 341A red wool scarf, wrapped in brown paper, still with a dark brown hardened streak. Bag 341B, black leather jacket, neatly folded, 1 cuff with a stain. Bag 341C, gray fabric scrap, and blonde hair, clamped between 2 wax paper sheets. Carney meticulously noted every detail, then signed to confirm the evidence condition. The original 1980 seal was intact, no signs of tampering, the wax cord still stiff. That meant the chain of custody was unbroken, the most critical factor for forensic validity. We have a little miracle here, Peter said quietly. 34 years, and it's still like the first day. That afternoon, the samples were transported by specialized vehicle to the Maine State Crime Lab in Augusta. The lab received the file at 3:45 p.m. The log stated, request STR DNA analysis on item 341A and 341B. Chain of custody verified. Carney returned to the office as night fell. Outside the window, snow fell sporadically, like the night Lisa vanished. She sat looking at a copy of the old Polaroid photo. Lisa in the red scarf, smiling brightly amid the snow. Part of investigative work made Carney detached, accustomed to unfinished story. But this case was different. Everything in the file was aged, voiceless. No one to recount, only dried blood and fabric fibers left. 3 days later, the lab reported initial DNA separation promising. The blood sample on the scarf still has trace activity, the technician announced over the phone. We can read at least 10 STR loci. Carney breathed a sigh of relief. She knew if they could recover a full genetic sequence, they could identify both the victim and the blood depositor. In her notebook, she wrote the day's final line, seal chain intact. Evidence survived 34 years. If anyone left blood on that wool scarf, we'll find them. Outside, Maine wind rose again, carrying biting cold. But in the brightly lit room, the just-opened old file crate made the air heavy for 3-decade shift. A case thought buried in snow and time began breathing again. On February 26, 2013, the Maine State Forensics Lab began opening the 2 key evidence bags, 341A and 341B. The room air was kept at absolute cold and dry. Every procedure continuously filmed to ensure legal process validity. Lead technician Dr. Ellen Harker, with over 20 years in old DNA work, donned new latex gloves, carefully cutting along the 1,980 sealed bag edge. Inside, the red wool scarf had faded, fibers dry and stiff. In the middle, a thick, dark brown streak remained, noted as blood stain. Dr. Harker used metal tweezers to extract it, cutting 2 pencil-tip-size samples, soaking into DNA extraction solution. A microscope displayed fiber structure on screen, clear to the wool weave, proof the sample hadn't fully degraded. "We have a chance," she said quietly, voice nearly emotional. The second bag, 341B, contained a long blonde hair strand clamped between wax paper sheets. The root still glossy. Harker separated one, placed in a test tube, added keratin-degrading enzyme, protecting DNA from breakdown. Samples went into centrifuge, then to STR reader, short tandem repeat, tech identifying gene sequences via DNA repeats. This was technique non-existent in 1979, but in 2013, it could ID a person from few surviving cells. 3 days later, the system showed first results, female DNA sample, full Lisa Montrose profile. Compared to reference from her relative sister Eleanor, submitted DNA in cold case initiative, absolute match at 16 genetic loci. Kearney, on duty at the office, received confirmation email Thursday morning. She reread the first line. Subject 341B, female DNA, confirmed match to Montrose family. Lisa was confirmed, at least in dried blood molecules, but the red scarf, once with another's blood. Analysis of sample 341A stunned the lab, unidentified male DNA profile. Full structure to 15 loci, enough for CODIS Combined DNA Index System, U.S. National DNA Database. Dr. Harker uploaded data to federal server, tagging ME 1979 341A male unknown. "We have a man who bled with her," Kearney told colleagues, reading the report. "Either the perpetrator injured during attack or someone trying to save her. But I don't buy the second." 2 weeks passed, investigation team barely slept. Each morning, Kearney checked CODIS emails for alerts. On March 11th at 6:17 a.m., her computer pinged match found. Screen displayed, partial match, subject Jack Thorne, Maine, Department of Public Safety, retired. She stared at the name long, almost disbelieving. Jack Thorne, the on-duty officer knight. Lisa vanished, unchargeable in 1980 for lack of evidence. After 2005 retirement, he joined state voluntary DNA submission. Officers voluntarily sampled to exclude from old files. That act now unlocked the case he thought buried. Kearney immediately called Dr. Harker. "Ellen, error probability on this sample. 1 in 50 billion, she replied without hesitation. "No coincidence. STR sequence matches fully at all extracted loci. It's the same person's DNA." Within 2 hours, full report sent to Maine DOJ. First page stated, "Re-DNA match, in case #79 341, Montrose Isa. Donor identified, Jack Thorne, Red A officer, Camden PD. Confidence level, 99.999,999,999, 8%. Kearney printed the report, placed on desk, stared long at old Polaroid. The red wool scarf in the photo, now confirmed perpetrator identity. All, Greeley suspected in 1980. Green truck, bloodied jacket, vague alibi, converged to one point. That afternoon, she held internal meeting with superiors. "We have DNA," she said firmly, "and it belongs to the man who led the search." Room silent minutes. An older officer shook head slightly. "I worked with him." "Impossible," Kearney replied curtly. "DNA doesn't lie." Same day, state prosecutor signed order restarting Montrose investigation, shifting from missing person to homicide investigation. Jack Thorne added, as primary suspect. New case code, ME 2013-041. That night, Kearney left headquarters late. Outside, light snow fell on Augusta buildings, like the night the girl vanished long ago. In darkness, streetlights reflected on snow, pale yellow like old Polaroid glow. She knew this case now more than a file. It was journey giving voice to one buried 34 years. And one DNA result line brought the entire past back. 34 years after the white snowy night of 1979, the wooden bridge where Lisa Montrose was last seen stood as a rickety frame, half sunk in mud, half jutting over the refrozen redirected river. Black rotten planks, rusted iron hooks, and closed since 1983. Sign swayed in cold wind. Detective Rachel Kearney stood amid the scene with Maine State Forensics team. eyes down at silent water like an old grave. "This is where the story began," she said, voice low, "and maybe where it ends." Forensics team deployed ground-penetrating radar, GPR, soil-penetrating radar, tech non-existent in 1979. Two techs moved slowly around bridge base, dragging silver box device sending signals underground, screen showing sediment layers disturbed decades ago. Under old ice, they detected anomaly, faint rectangular shape, 40 centimeters deep, 3 meters from riverbank. "That spot looks dug," the tech said, pointing at screen. Kearney leaned down, signaled test dig. Damp cold soil, smell of rotten wood and rust rose. After nearly an hour, shovels hit something hard. Thick wood fragment, mottled, like from bridge railing. Lifting it, dim light hit surface, still deep dark brown streak embedded. "Blood," a specialist whispered. Kearney gloved up, touched wood lightly. Wood fibrous rotten, but stained seemingly protected by underlying cold soil. She signaled seal sample, labeled evidence hash, 79341D. Wood fragment, possible blood stain. Wood piece boxed in stainless, sent same day to Maine State Crime Lab. 2 days later, analysis results returned. DNA on wood matched Lisa Montrose. Blood too old for typing, but STR sequence absolute match at 16 loci, confirming victim bled right at wooden bridge site. Kearney read report silently. Words brief, cold, but heavy as testimony from Earth. Sample 79341D. Confirms human blood, DNA match, Montrose. Lisa case hash IME 1000, 979-341. Probability of random match, 1 in 25 trillion. Now no doubt. Lisa didn't vanish ambiguously. She was injured and bled at Camden Wooden Bridge, night December 27, 1979. Investigation team returned to scene for official crime scene map. They used drone for 3D scan, reconstructing area as at incident time. Reconstruction showed, if Lisa attacked at bridge head, blood from wound could splatter railing, soak into wood after temporary 1980 bridge repair. Then buried when partial collapse in 1983 storm. A forensics specialist pointed at 3D model on laptop. She could have been struck from behind, collapsed here. Kearney eyed red dot on screen, matching wood fragment location, then nodded, and perpetrator had time to clean scene. Dump her in water. But river iced that year, no chance to drift far. While forensics scanned area, they found small metal object, belt buckle fragment, rusted and dirt covered. Though no biologics left, buckle shape ID as Camden PD issue late 1970s. Thorne, on duty then, used similar belt. By now, case picture sharpened. Victim left bar 10:45 p.m. Walked over bridge. Perpetrator, likely Thorne, followed, possibly intoxicated. At bridge head, altercation, injuring Lisa. Her blood splattered railing, soaked wood. Then body hidden or thrown in river while ice thin. On March 20, 2013, Maine State Police officially marked Camden Wooden Bridge area as crime scene. Temporary historical site sign replaced with red, restricted area, active homicide investigation. Kearney stood gazing at wording in cold wind, breath white vapor. Each gust carried mud and melting snow smell, mixed eerie feeling, like past just awakened from soil. 34 years, and finally Lisa spoke, she whispered, then turned to forensics team. Record all data, mark exact wood fragment position. This no longer hypothesis, this is where she was attacked. From that moment, Maine 1979, cold case no longer dusty mystery file. It officially became confirmed homicide, and Camden Wooden Bridge, once just snowy memory, now final witness to a crime night revived. After Camden Wooden Bridge scene officially designated crime scene, Detective Rachel Kearney's investigation team shifted full focus to the only man mentioned in old file, Jack Thorne. That name lay dormant in records 34 years, noted as potential suspect then overlooked for lack evidence. But now, every piece, from DNA, tire tracks, blood location, pointed same way. Kearney reopened 1979 duty logs stored at Camden PD archives. Amid yellowed pages, she found December 27th shift roster, Officer Jack Thorne, shift 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. Under duty notes, patrol areas listed detailed, except blank from 10:50 to 11:30 p.m. No notes, no radio report, no explanation. 40-minute gap, Kearney said dryly, pointing at Page. And that's exactly when Lisa Montrose vanished. She called Data Tech to rescan all Camden PD 1979 radio logs. Old tapes on reels, noisy, distorted, but short segment notable. At 10:52 p.m., Thorne radioed dispatch truck, having issues, stopping to check engine. No one heard him report back. Next morning report, Thorne noted, truck stalled. No major issue. From 1980 forensics report, Greeley preserved images of Goodyear extra grip pickup tire tracks in mud near bridge. Kearney compared to Camden PD vehicle maintenance logs, finding only one fleet truck with those tires, dark green pickup, #27C, Thorne's. No doubt, on-duty man night, Lisa vanished was present near scene, and male blood DNA on red wool scarf matched him. Kearney began undercover phase to bolster arrest warrant evidence. She and colleague, investigator Frank Daly, drove to Rockland, where Thorne lived. Now 61, gray-haired, still ran small boat repair shop harborside. Neighbors described him calm, polite, likes golf and morning coffee. But to Kearney, familiar shell of those believing past escaped forever. Over 2 weeks, they secretly tailed Thorne's routines. Each morning, he drove Old Ford to Harbor Cafe downtown Rockland. Sat window corner table, sipped cappuccino reading paper. When he left, Kearney approached server, retrieved his coffee cup and tissues, carefully bagged as evidence. Another time, they picked up cigarette butt he discarded at dock. These samples rushed to Maine State Crime Lab for DNA comparison to male from red wool scarf. Kearney waited silently, but knew, if match final evidence, sealing case. 3 days later, report arrived. Opening email, subject line breathless. Match confirmed, subject Thorne Jack. Report stated, DNA profile from coffee cup and tissue matches, male DNA from item 341 a scarf. Probability of random match 1 in 50 billion. Kearney reread each line, then leaned back, eyes fixed ceiling. Brief moment, felt 1,979, present distance shrink, faded Polaroids, snow tire tracks, blood-soaked red scarf, all now spoke same truth. She called Maine State Prosecutor Alan Marks, cold case initiative lead. We have full DNA chain match. Thorne is man who bled with victim, Kearney said. Other end, Marks replied softly, that's enough for arrest warrant. That afternoon, in state DOJ meeting room, Kearney presented full evidence chain, victim DNA Lisa Montrose, matches blood on bridge wood. Male DNA on wool scarf, matches Jack Thorne. 1979, Goodyear extra grip tire tracks match Thorne's police pickup. Duty log shows unexplained 40-minute gap. Truck broke, alibi lacks technical corroboration, all pieced into airtight logic chain, what Greeley lacked 34 years ago. At 1740, Prosecutor Marks signed the order, State of Maine versus Jack Thorne, warrant of arrest for second-degree murder. Lisa Montrose case, 1979. Kearney held the warrant, silently looking at the line, arrest authorized. In her mind, images appeared, the snowy night of 1979. The young girl crossing the wooden bridge, the red scarf fluttering in the wind, and the man driving the dark green truck stopping by the roadside. When Kearney left the Department of Justice building, it was already dark. Light snow fell, sparkling in the streetlights. She walked quickly to her car, her hand gripping the file tightly. The next step was already set. Tomorrow morning, Rockland would wake up to news it never expected, that their hero, former officer Jack Thorne, was about to be arrested for killing a girl on a winter night in 1979. The morning of June 21, 2013, Rockland, Maine, was shrouded in thick fog, and the quiet waves outside the harbor. The clock struck 5:30 when the convoy of Maine State Police vehicles and 2 FBI agents turned onto the small road leading to the white-painted wooden house on the outskirts, where Jack Thorne had lived peacefully for nearly a decade. No sirens, no flashing lights, just a meticulously calculated raid to close 34 years of a case thought dead with time. Kearney sat in the lead vehicle, her hand gripping the arrest warrant just signed the night before. Beside her, Federal Agent David Morrow checked the task list one last time. When the vehicle stopped, the cold sea wind hit their faces. Before them was the silent house. Curtains drawn, Kearney glanced at her watch, signaling. Now 3 strong knocks sounded, followed by the police's resounding shout. "State Police, warrant to arrest. Mr. Thorne, please open the door." Inside, a few seconds of silence stretched, seemingly endless. Finally, the sound of the lock turning. The door cracked open, and Jack Thorne, silver-haired in a gray sweater, cold eyes appeared. He looked at Kearney, then at the lowered guns in front of him, showing no fear or surprise. "Jack Thorne," Kearney read aloud, "you are under arrest, pursuant to a warrant for second-degree murder in the Lisa Montrose case, occurring on December 27, 1979. Thorne slightly raised an eyebrow, his voice deep and calm. "You're making a mistake. I didn't kill anyone." "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Morrow said evenly. "Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney." Thorne didn't resist when handcuffed. He just looked around his small house, the neat desk, the wall clock stopped at 5:31, then nodded slightly, as if accepting an administrative procedure. While Thorne was escorted to the vehicle, the investigation team entered to search per the accompanying warrant. The 2-story house was tidy, walls hung with old police medals and photos of him with colleagues. But in the desk drawer, they found an old map of the Camden Wooden Bridge area, folded many times. On the map, faint pencil marks, a small circle in the South Woods area by the bridge, with an arrow pointing downstream. Next to it, an old duty logbook, spine-worn, containing Thorne's handwritten pages from his police days. Kearney flipped to the page marked December 27, 1979. Between the notes at 10:30 and 11:30, there was a wide blank space, crossed out then overwritten in small letters. Patrol delay, vehicle maintenance. But that writing differed from the rest, fainter, more scribbled, clearly added later. "He altered the time," Kearney said quietly, placing the book in an evidence bag. They seized a small metal box from a wooden cabinet, inside containing old photos, a Polaroid of the Camden Wooden Bridge in winter, speckled with lights. In the corner one could make out a faint streak, like a person's shadow. No one said anything, but everyone knew this was no longer coincidence. As the convoy left the neighborhood, neighbors began peeking outdoors. A few recognized the handcuffed old man as police hero Thorne. A woman whispered, "Impossible, he once helped my kid find a lost bike." But Kearney didn't stop. She walked quickly toward the vehicle, her eyes not leaving the figure just seated in the back, face indifferent looking out the fogged window. At the Maine State Police headquarters in Augusta, Thorne was brought to the interrogation room at 9 a.m. Kearney handled the questioning herself. He sat straight-backed, hands clasped, face calm. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked, opening the file on the table. "Because you found a bit of blood on an old scarf," Thorne replied, voice bland. "That doesn't prove anything." Kearney flipped to the photo of the red scarf in the envelope, next to the bold-printed DNA report. "Match confirmed. Jack Thorne," she said slowly. "Not just the scarf. The DNA sample on the wooden bridge fragment also matches the victim. And you were the only one on duty, driving the Goodyear pickup through there right when she disappeared. Now I just want to hear from you, what happened that night." Thorne looked at her for a long time, eyes cold and deep, then slightly shrugged. "You're chasing ghosts. That girl could have slipped, could have been hurt by someone else. But not me." Kearney didn't respond, just closed the file, her eyes not leaving him. She knew a confession wouldn't come easily. But she also understood this was just the beginning. The evidence was enough. The interrogation was only to make him face the truth that DNA had spoken for. As the room door closed, in the hallway outside, a young officer asked quietly, "Do you think he'll confess?" Corny looked through the foggy glass, where Thorne's shadow cast on the wall, and replied softly, "Not today. But he knows the hunt is over." The small interrogation room, fluorescent lights casting cold white down on the metal table. Jack Thorne sat still, hands clasped, wrists still marked from the cuffs. Before him, Detective Rachel Corny placed a thick file, beside it an unopened water bottle. No lawyer, Thorne insisted. He had nothing to hide. The air thickened like frozen when Corny began speaking, voice even and low. "Mr. Thorne, this isn't a casual chat. We have your DNA on Lisa Montrose's wool scarf. That sample fully matches the one you voluntarily provided in 2005. The error probability is 1 in 50 billion. Do you understand what that means?" Thorne didn't respond. His eyes stared blankly at the one-way mirror on the wall, reflecting his own image, older, weaker, but still trying to maintain composure. Corny pulled a Polaroid from the file bag, pushing it toward him, the red scarf, stained dark brown, amid snow. "This is hers," she said. "Her blood, and yours. You two were there together, bleeding together." She paused, opening another photo, the old wood fragment in an envelope. "And this is where she fell. We found Lisa's DNA on the wood. She didn't fall into the river. She was attacked right there." Thorne sighed, light but clear. He picked up the photo, examined it a moment, then set it down. "Things were different back then," he said quietly, almost to himself. "No technology, no one believed an officer could do that. You're talking about 30 years ago, Detective. You know nothing about that night." Corny sat straight, her voice firm. "I know enough. Know that the 19-year-old girl never made it home, and that the only one on duty in the bridge area was you. I know you lied about the truck breaking down, and I have the duty log with altered handwriting. You changed the time to cover the 40-minute gap. Do you want to tell me anything?" Thorne was silent. The room held only the faint ticking of the clock. A minute passed. Then two. He tapped his finger lightly on the table, eyes still fixed on the red scarf photo. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse and low, almost a breath. "No one will find her." The room fell dead silent. Corny looked up, eyes sharp as a blade. "What did you just say?" Thorne leaned back in his chair, gaze drifting. "She's still there, under the woods, where no one ever dug." For a few seconds Corny couldn't breathe. The simple words, but like a shockwave tearing through the fog, shrouding the case for 34 years. She leaned forward, voice trembling slightly with restraint. "You're talking about the South Woods by Camden Bridge? What did you do to her there?" Thorne didn't answer. He just looked at his hands, eyes empty, then said quietly, "You wouldn't understand. The snow was thick then. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Corny pressed. "You say you didn't mean to, but hid the body for 30 years? Where did you drive her, Thorne?" Silence. Then he tilted his head slightly, a faint smile crossing his lips. "By now, the snow might have buried it all, but I bet you'll go look." Corny abruptly stood, chair scraping on the tile. She stepped out of the room, heart pounding. In the hallway, she looked straight at Agent Morrow, waiting, and said decisively, "We need a warrant for extended search of the entire South Woods by the bridge, right now." Morrow nodded, rushing off to call the state prosecutor. Meanwhile, Corny leaned against the wall, eyes through the one-way glass at the man inside. Thorne sat still, hands clasped, head bowed. His posture quiet, almost calm. But Corny knew it wasn't the peace of innocence. It was the demeanor of someone who'd hidden a secret half a life, now just waiting to see if the past would be unearthed. 3 hours later, Knox County Court signed the warrant for extended search of the South Woods by Camden Bridge, an area never scanned in 1979 due to swampy terrain and thick ice. The order was forwarded straight to the state special search team. That night, leaving the station, Corny paused on the steps, looking at the pitch-black moonless sky. In her head, echoed Thorne's words. "She's still there, under the woods, She knew she'd just heard the first indirect confession. And somewhere, amid old trees and cold snow-covered ground, Lisa Montrose might still be waiting to be found. 3 days after the interrogation, Camden's sky was covered in thick cotton-like fog, the pine rows south of the wooden bridge appearing and disappearing in the white haze. Based on Jack Thorne's vague statement, the Maine State investigation team set up a field tent right at the woods entrance by the river, where he said no one ever dug. This was low-lying land, swampy and full of roots, overlooked in 1979 searches due to flooding and thick ice. Detective Rachel Carney stood amid the area, her eyes scanning the damp black ground, covered in decaying leaves. "Start from this direction," she said, pointing to the land about 40 meters from the riverbank. If he hit her here, the current would cover all traces. The sound of small excavators began, mixed with metal hitting rocks and wind whispering through the woods. The forensics team used ground-penetrating radar, GPR, to scan sections. After hours, the screen showed an anomalous response, a mass about half a meter thick, structure differing from natural soil. Carney stared at the screen, her heart racing. "Here," she said quietly. "Dig here." Digging deeper than 40 centimeters, the soil darkened. Then the technician paused. In the dirt, something faintly gleamed under flashlight, a metal button typed for women's coats from the 1970s. As more shovels of earth were removed, they saw a faded red fabric scrap, then something white protruding, a small bone fragment, slightly curved, like a wrist bone. No one spoke. The whole wood silent. "Stop," Carney signaled. "From now on, dig manually, record everything." She knelt, with the forensics specialist, gently brushing away handfuls of dirt. Small bone pieces gradually appeared, forearm, ribs, pelvis, then finally a human skull, partially crushed at the temple. Beside it, other fabric scraps, a floral dress, faded but pattern intact. A thin silver necklace caked in dirt, coiled around the collar. Carney looked down, speechless. "She's still there under the woods." Thorne's words in interrogation echoed in her head. The remains were meticulously excavated over 2 days, each bone piece placed in specialized plastic boxes, numbered by position. When the last part of the body was lifted from the pit, the area enveloped in absolute silence, only the strong heartbeats in everyone's ears. A forensic specialist looked at Carney, voice low. "I think we just found Lisa Montrose." The entire bone samples and evidence were transferred to Maine State Crime Lab that night. 2 weeks later, DNA results from the femur compared to the victim's sister's sample showed full match, no deviation at any locus. The report concluded, remains identified as Lisa Montrose, cause of death, blunt force trauma to skull. After 34 years, the girl who disappeared in the white snowy night of 1979 had been found. Carney read the report in her office early morning, her hand trembling slightly. On the desk, still the old photo of Lisa in the red wool scarf, youthful smile now just memory. She typed each word into her final log. After 34 years, the victim was found. That afternoon, the Montrose 1979 case was officially classified murder, case solved. The Maine State Police chief signed a notice to federal DOJ, affirming verified autopsy results. Complete evidence chain, perpetrator is Jack Thorne. Carney and the team returned to the woods one last time. The dig site filled back, damp ground still marked with their boot prints. "She waited too long," she said, quietly placing a white wildflower there. On the way leaving Camden, snow began falling sporadically, thin and quiet, like the story's first night. But this time, the town was no longer silent. Somewhere, deep in the woods, the past had finally been unearthed. 3 weeks after excavating the remains in the South Woods by Camden Bridge, all evidence, bones, fabric scraps, soil samples, and small metal items were tightly sealed in special preservation crates, transferred to the FBI Federal Investigation Lab in Quantico, Virginia. Independent verification by FBI was the final step to confirm absolute legality and accuracy of the entire evidence chain in the Montrose case. Detective Rachel Kearney was present when the specialized convoy left Maine, escorted by 2 state police and a DOJ representative. On the armored crates, red seals clearly stated, "Evidence, Lisa Montrose case #me 1979-341, chain of custody verified." Upon arriving in Quantico, the evidence crates were taken straight to the Forensic Evidence Intake Lab, where seasoned technicians handled complex national cases. In charge was Special Agent Dr. Thomas Vega, expert in ancient DNA and long-term evidence tracing. He received the file from Kearney's hand, opening seals in a negative pressure room. 34 years is a long stretch, he said. But if preserved properly, the truth remains in every grain of dirt. Day 1, Vega's team checked preservation: dry bones, no mold, fabric around neck bone still with hair strands, soil from pit bottom, sealed separately in insulated plastic bags. After confirming no chain of custody deviations, they began analysis. Femur and skull bones were sampled for powder to test DNA. Mitochondrial DNA sequencing, often used in old cases, was deployed. Results after 48 hours, mitochondrial DNA sequence 100% match, with reference from Eleanor Montrose, victim's sister. Report stated briefly, sample A1 femur bone and sample A2 skull fragment confirm identical mitochondrial DNA pattern. Positive match to Montrose family line. Simultaneously, criminalists analyzed cuts on skull and arm bones. Under electron microscope, cuts had parallel grooves, characteristic of flat metal-edged tool, like a folding knife or multi-tool. Forensic specialist noted, wound pattern consistent with sharp-edged metallic blade, possibly hunting knife or standard issue field knife. This was key detail, since in Camden PD gear inventory, late 1970s, each officer issued Gerber Mark I folding knife. In Thorne's retirement handover log, noted lost his standard knife. Kearney heard the report via direct phone from Quantico. Her voice low but firm, "If the cuts match police knife type, we can link the weapon to him." Vega replied, "No doubt. It's a rare type, only in batches issued to forces 1978-1980. Day 3, forensic geology team analyzed soil samples from under remains. They compared mineral composition to samples from various Camden spots, recollected in 2013 survey. Results: soil under remains contained unusually high pyrite and silica ratios, exact type only in South Woods by Bridge, where ground affected by old current. Especially, sediment layer with iron oxide signs, matching Jack Thorne's old map, marked downstream direction from his home. In the report, specialist wrote, soil composition sample D3, consistent with Camden South Woods area, probability of random mismatch, 0.001%. That map, once suspected as an old collectible, now became key incriminating evidence. It not only pointed to the burial site, but also matched perfectly with the soil sample, proof that Thorne had once set foot exactly where Lisa was found. On the 5th day, the FBI compiled all data, DNA, tool traces, geology, physics, then presented it in a 124-page report sent to the Maine Department of Justice. The first page, stamped, conclusive chain of evidence, no break detected. The final summary line stated, 1. Human remains confirm identity, Lisa Montrose. 2. Cause of death, blunt and sharp force trauma. 3. Tool mark evidence, consistent with metallic blade, law enforcement issue. 4. Soil sample. Under remains matches Camden South Woods coordinates marked on suspect's personal map. 5. Chain of custody, verified from 1980 through 2013. No contamination or break. Conclusion: evidentiary link between suspect Jack Thorne and homicide of Lisa Montrose established beyond reasonable doubt. Upon receiving the copy of the report from Quantico, Kearney stood silently before her office window, looking out at Camden Harbor misty in the afternoon fog. On the desk, files piled high, but now no longer meaningless papers. Each line of data, each test result, was testimony from the past. 34 years, a strand of hair, a wood fragment, a map, all connected into a perfect evidence chain without a single gap. In her work log, Carney wrote, "All links verified. The circle is closed." That evening, when she placed the Quantico report on State Prosecutor Alan Marks's desk, he only said one sentence: "With this evidence chain, the court will have no choice but to convict." The Montrose case, once forgotten in Maine's frigid file storage, now had a solid legal backbone. Everything from DNA to soil, from map to knife marks, all told the same story, that Lisa Montrose was killed on the night of December 27, 1979, and the killer was none other than the officer who once swore to protect that town. On August 10, 2013, 6 weeks after FBI Quantico confirmed the evidence chain absolutely valid, the Maine State Attorney's Office officially filed charges against Jack Thorne for second-degree murder and concealment of a corpse. The indictment was 42 pages long, opening with a concise but firm sentence: "The state of Maine, through the Attorney General's office, charges that on or about December 27, 1979, the defendant, Jack Thorne, did unlawfully and intentionally cause the death of Lisa Montrose, and subsequently concealed her body in the Camden South Woods." That morning's press conference in Augusta, Prosecutor Alan Marks stood beside Detective Rachel Kearney, his voice clear through the microphone. "After 34 years, justice can finally speak for itself. No case is truly closed until the truth is confirmed." Behind that statement was a massive file, over 1,000 pages, compiling every piece of evidence 3 decades of investigation had found. DNA samples from the red wool scarf, leather jacket, and wood fragment under the bridge, all matching Jack Thorne. Indirect confession in interrogation: "No one will find her. She's still there, under the woods." Map of the wooden bridge area kept by Thorne, with marks matching the remains discovery site. Soil, under bones matching geological composition at the marked region. And cuts on victims' bones, consistent with the Gerber Mark I knife issued to Camden Police in 1979. In the internal memo, Marks clearly explained the reason for choosing second degree over first degree: insufficient evidence to prove premeditated intent to murder. However, the violent act leading to death was intentional and severe, accompanied by concealing the body for decades. Additionally, the indictment supplemented with obstruction of justice for Thorne, altering duty logs, and lying in prior interrogations. At the state prosecutor's headquarters, Kearney presented the entire investigation timeline again to the prosecution team. She stood before the whiteboard, writing each milestone clearly. 10:45 p.m., December 27, 1979. Lisa Montrose left Fisherman's Wharf. 10:50, 11:30 p.m. Thorne left station unreported. After 11 p.m., witness heard dark green pickup near bridge. Scene: Lisa and Thorne, blood on wool scarf, Goodyear extra grip tire tracks, matching Thorne's truck. 1980 case closed, evidence sealed. 2013, reopened file. DNA testing, discovered remains at exact map position by Thorne. Each mark, each detail, was a nail in the chain of lies he built over 34 years. On August 22, Jack Thorne was brought from Knox County Jail to preliminary court to hear the charges. He wore an orange jumpsuit, silver hair disheveled, face calm, as if he were just a witness in a distant case. When the judge read the charges, he only said 4 words: "I plead not guilty, Your Honor." Voice hoarse, cold, without a trace of emotion. Kearney was present in the prosecution row, sitting silently watching the man once the town symbol. In that brief moment, she suddenly remembered Lisa, the girl with the red scarf fluttering in the snowy night, and knew that finally, this long journey had reached the confrontation. Judge Henry Wallace set the trial date: the state of Maine versus Jack Thorne, jury trial scheduled for October 7, 2013, Bangor Superior Court. Outside the court, reporters packed the steps, flashes blazing like lightning rain. The next morning, Bangor Daily News ran a large headline: Arrested hero, former Camden officer charged with 1979 murder. News spread quickly through Camden and Rockland. Residents, stunned. In Harbor Cafe, where Thorne once sat reading the paper each morning, the owner said in a whisper, "I once thought he was a good man. Didn't expect the whole town lived next to someone with a secret." Back at the office, Kearney completed the final investigation phase report. The words she typed even, firm, all forensic and testimonial evidence consolidated, case ready for prosecution. In the notes, she added, for 34 years, Lisa Montrose was missing. Today, she is represented in every page of this file. She folded the nearly 2-inch thick file, placed it on Prosecutor Marks's desk. He glanced at the cover, just nodded. The bold headline stood out on the file cover. State of Maine versus Jack Thorne. The trial was set for October, right when the first snow began blanketing Maine. And that year, when Bangor Superior Court opened, justice was no longer a promise, but had become an indictment written by the very evidence time couldn't erase. October 2013. First snow of the season began falling on Bangor City. Bangor Superior Court was packed early morning, press crowding hallways, local TV stations, setting up cameras right on the gray stone steps. After over 34 years, the Lisa Montrose case, the girl who disappeared in the 1979 snowy night, finally entered trial. On the electronic board outside the courtroom, the line read clearly, State of Maine versus Jack Thorne. Murder, second degree. Large courtroom, cold white light. In the front row, Detective Rachel Kearney sat beside State Prosecutor Alan Marks. Opposite, Jack Thorne, now a 61-year-old man, silver hair, face deeply wrinkled, sat silent, in gray suit, expressionless. Before the lenses, he maintained his inherent calm, as if still in the role of a respected ex-officer rather than the accused killer. When Judge Henry Wallace entered, the wooden gavel sounded decisively. The criminal trial of the state of Maine against defendant Jack Thorne officially begins. The jury of 12, 8 men, 4 women, selected from Knox and Penobscot counties, people who'd read about this case since young. None hid their anticipation. Prosecutor Alan Marks opened with a deep, slow voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story about a small town, a cold winter, and a lie lasting 34 years. On the night of December 27, 1979, Lisa Montrose, 19, vanished on her way home. And the last person recorded near her was the defendant, a police officer named Jack Thorne. He stepped to the evidence display table. On the large screen, photos appeared. The red wool scarf, old wood fragment, Camden Bridge map found in Thorne's home. Marks calmly presented each detail, each confirmed forensic evidence, male DNA sample on wool scarf, fully matching Jack Thorne. Error probability 1 in 50 billion. Tool traces on skull and arm bones, consistent with Gerber Mark I knife, issued to Camden Police in 1979. Soil sample, under remains fully matching soil at Woods area, circled on Thorne's map. His indirect statement in interrogation, no one will find her, she's still there, under the woods. We don't just have DNA, Mark said, voice hardening. We have time, place, tool, and confession, even if veiled. Each small piece forms a single picture. He killed that girl, then buried her under the woods. Defense attorney Paul Hendricks stood to rebut. He was experienced, having won many tough cases. Your Honor, he said, my client does not deny participating in Lisa Montrose's search, but his DNA on the wool scarf only proves he once touched the evidence during investigation, not that he's the killer. And the recording, the word she's still there under the woods. Who guarantees it wasn't edited? 30 years is enough for everything to be distorted. Prosecutor Marks responded with deadly calm. He called FBI Quantico's audio expert to testify. The middle-aged man with glasses, holding a report over 100 pages. We analyzed the interrogation recording using voice frequency and audio spectrum tech. Conclusion: no signs of splicing, editing, or added layers. The recording is completely original. Marks looked at the jury, and you just heard him say it. The recording played again in court. Kearney's voice sounded on tape. What do you mean by that? A long silence. Then Thorne's murky voice. She's still there, under the woods, where no one ever dug. No one in the room spoke. The tape ran faintly, blending with wind outside the window. After the recording ended, Hendricks tried to counter, "That's not a confession. That's just a hypothesis, a metaphorical image." But the jury didn't look his way. They were fixed on Thorne, who still sat calm, eyes cold as stone. Marks continued presenting forensic evidence. He called Dr. Thomas Vega, expert from Quantico, to the stand. Vega detailed DNA testing and soil analysis. No possibility of random coincidence. Every sample matches absolutely. No deviation at any locus, he said, voice firm as nails. The jury viewed a digital map reconstructing the scene. Lisa's path, wooden bridge position, woods where remains found. When the final image appeared, the body found less than 100 meters from the old bridge. Many bowed heads. A few women quietly wiped tears. In the final defense, Hendricks tried to create doubt. Was there anyone else that night? Could it be a stranger, someone passing through? But Marks needed only a short response to end. No one else was there. Only one on duty, one with blood traces, and one carrying a map pointing exactly where the girl was found. That afternoon, as the sun lowered outside the large window, Judge Wallace declared arguments closed. He turned to the jury. "Now justice is in your hands." Before leaving for deliberation, the jury requested to hear the recording one more time. When Thorne's voice sounded the second time, "She's still there under the woods," none of them doubted anymore. That cold, calm statement rang like the period on 34 years of silence. Kearney sat in the back row, hand gripping Lisa's photo in her pocket. She no longer looked at Thorne. For her, the verdict was clear from the moment he said it. When the truth, finally, was no longer under the woods. 9 hours after final arguments ended, the jury returned to Bangor Superior Court courtroom. Outside, night had fallen, thick snow blanketing the court steps. In the courtroom, pale yellow lights cast on everyone's tense faces. Jack Thorne sat at the defendant's table, hands clasped, still coldly calm. In the prosecution row, Detective Rachel Kearney stood beside Prosecutor Alan Marks. Eyes not leaving the deliberation room door. As the jury entered, everyone held breath. The foreman, a middle-aged man, held a folded paper, stepping to the podium. Judge Henry Wallace asked, voice echoing in silence, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The man nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." A short pause stretched endless. Then he read clearly each word, voice calm but firm. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Jack Thorne, guilty of second-degree murder in the killing of Lisa Montrose." Sighs escaped from the audience row. A few covered mouths. An old woman softly sobbed. Kearney said nothing, just bowed her head. Eyes closed for seconds. 34 years from a snowy evening to this day, every effort, every evidence piece, every past voice led to one conclusion. Thorne still sat calm. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he looked up. Voice hoarse but steady. "I didn't kill that girl. You can believe in DNA, in twisted words, but you don't have the soul of this story. I have no regrets, because I did nothing wrong." No one responded. Judge Wallace looked down at the sentence on the desk, lightly tapping the gavel. "Jack Thorne, you have been found guilty by the jury of second-degree murder. Pursuant to Maine Criminal Code, the court sentences 35 years imprisonment at Warren Correctional Facility, federal prison, with no parole eligibility for the first 25 years. The wooden gavel sounded dryly, echoing in the wide courtroom. Thorne stood, 2 officers escorting him away. As he passed Kearney, he glanced briefly, not with hateful eyes, but as if wanting to say this story, for him, wasn't over. But Kearney didn't look back. She only whispered, enough for herself. "It's over, Jack." Outside court, reporters' flashes blazed continuously. News spread in minutes. Next day's Bangor Daily News front page headline, "Montrose case solved after 34 years. Former officer found guilty." A short press conference held at Maine DOJ headquarters that evening. Prosecutor Marks read statement to media. "Today, the state of Maine has closed one of its longest cases in history. We thank the Cold Case Investigation Team, FBI Quantico, and especially Detective Rachel Kearney, who never stopped pursuing justice for Lisa Montrose. Kearney stood behind, avoiding camera lenses. When asked her thoughts, she only said, "This isn't my victory. This is the answer a girl waited over 3 decades for. She's no longer missing." The next day, the case file updated in Maine Criminal Archive System, the final bold line, status, solved, homicide confirmed. Case, Montrose, Lisa, 1979, 2013. The old wooden bridge in Camden, where it all began, was sealed for months for survey and preservation. When spring came, locals erected a small stone marker by the bridge entrance. On it carved simple words, "In memory of Lisa Montrose." Justice came home after 34 winters. That afternoon, Kearney returned there alone. Sea wind blew through, carrying salt and damp wood smell. She stood looking at water, sparkling with melting snowlight, where a secret was buried half a life, and whispered in breath. Justice came late, but finally came. A week after sentencing, Maine DOJ released the Cold Case Squad Technical Summary Report, a 186-page document evaluating the entire reinvestigation of Lisa Montrose case 1979-2013. The report title simple, Cold Case Review #45, The Camden Bridge Investigation. But behind that title was a story of how science, persistence, and faith in justice revived a case thought eternally buried. The report's first page stated clearly, evidence chain of custody maintained perfectly from 1980 to 2013. No deviations, losses, or cross-contamination signs. This is one of the rare cases in Maine history where the entire evidence chain retained legal value after over 3 decades. The first part of the report, co-authored by Detective Rachel Kearney and forensics expert Dr. Thomas Vega, describes in detail the journey of evidence recovery. The sealed bags marked 341A, 341B, 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 C. The red wool scarf, leather jacket, fabric scrap, and hair were preserved in a stable environment at the Bangor storage facility, with an average temperature of 10 degrees Celsius and humidity maintained at 50%. It was these conditions that saved the evidence from degradation, allowing the cold case team the opportunity to perform modern DNA testing 34 years later. Kearney wrote in the introduction, "Not every old case has a resolution, but when you open an evidence bag after 3 decades, see the seal intact and the wax scent still lingering, you understand that justice sometimes just slumbers, but never dies." The report then explains in detail the STR DNA technology, short tandem repeat, the foundation of the breakthrough in the Montrose case. This technology allows for individual identification through short repeating gene segments in chromosomes, with an error probability of only 1 in tens of billions. Thanks to STR, the dried blood sample on the red wool scarf, once thought useless in 1979, revealed the identities of 2 people, Lisa Montrose and Jack Thorne. Dr. Vega explains, in sample 341A, we discovered 2 distinct STR sequences. One female sequence matched the reference sample from Lisa's relative, the other was male, and later confirmed to match completely with the DNA that Jack Thorne had provided upon retirement. This is the first time in Maine forensics history that a DNA sample was matched across 30 years thanks to the CODIS database. CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, is the national database allowing investigative agencies across the U.S. to compare old DNA samples with data from millions of individuals. In 2005, when Thorne participated in the voluntary DNA submission program for retired officers, he could not have imagined that act would become the key to locking himself behind bars 8 years later. The Cold Case Squad report states clearly, the breakthrough in the case came from retesting the old blood sample with STR and entering the data into CODIS. This is a direct result of the evidence storage program and the voluntary DNA submission policy of the state police force. The middle part of the report presents in detail the chain of custody from 1979 to 2013. Each step is listed by date, responsible person, and evidence condition. There were no violations in preservation or transportation. The chain of evidence is divided into 4 phases. Collection phase, 1979-1980. Lieutenant Harold Greeley sealed the evidence, handed it over to the Bangor storage. Storage phase, 1980-1995, preserved in the old facility, seal not opened. Transfer phase 1995, moved to new facility with environmental controls. Reopening phase 2013. Cold case squad opened and inspected under direct supervision, no deviations. The conclusion determines the chain of evidence achieves evidentiary integrity level 1, the highest level in the state's evaluation system. This means all evidence is legally recognized by the court, usable in criminal prosecution, without additional verification. The report also emphasizes the scientific and legal significance of the case. Thanks to the combination of STR technology, CODIS database, and modern forensic geology methods, the Montrose case became one of the longest cold cases solved by DNA evidence in Maine history. In the professional lessons section, the cold case squad concludes, in every case, evidence is never useless if preserved properly. A drop of blood, a strand of hair can hold the entire truth that humans take decades to hear. The last page of the report notes in uppercase, historic solved case #45, Lisa Montrose 1979, 2013. Below is a small line, handwritten by Kearney herself before filing the document in the Central Archive. She was found. After 34 winters, she spoke again, through science. On the day the report was released, the governor of Maine signed a decision to include the Montrose case in the State Police Academy's forensics training program, as a typical example of technical investigation for cold files. The case not only closed a tragedy, but also opened a new standard for how science can achieve the seemingly impossible, giving voice back to those buried by time. December 2013, 3 months after the sentence for Jack Thorne took effect, the Maine Department of Justice announced a comprehensive overhaul plan for cold case investigations. That plan began with a name, Lisa Montrose. In the press conference in Augusta, Director Mary Connors stated, "The Montrose case is not just a victory for justice. It is a reminder that if evidence remains, if procedures are upheld, then no case is truly cold." Connors announced an unprecedented decision. The Maine DOJ would review over 200 unsolved files from the 1960s to 1990s. Each file was evaluated based on 3 criteria: evidence condition, DNA recovery potential, and witness priority level. In the first list of 10 cases, 5 were transferred directly to the cold case squad, the unit that once solved Montrose. Within weeks, the third-floor hallways of the DOJ headquarters in Augusta became crowded with old file crates. Faded yellow labels reading Bangor 1982, Portland 1974, Caribou 1987, all brought to light after decades. Many young investigators called it the Montrose effect. Rachel Kearney, now a senior advisor for the cold case squad, was assigned to train the new investigative team. She opened the first training session with her own story. The Lisa Montrose case was solved, not by luck. It was solved by 3 things: intact evidence, advancing science, and a team that believed justice has no expiration. She pointed to the screen, displaying images of the red wool scarf and old wood fragment. "We found the truth from these 2 small items. The lesson is, never underestimate anything." The plan to review 200 files quickly received strong support from neighboring states. New Hampshire and Vermont, 2 states with similar terrain, climate, and cold case scale to Maine, sent representatives to learn the evidence preservation process. At the Interstate Conference in March 2014 in Concord, Kearney presented the report, Preserving the Past, Lessons from the Montrose Case. That presentation went straight to the core, the importance of the chain of custody and digitizing storage data. She explained how Maine maintained original seals for 34 years, thanks to a 3-tier logging system, manual logs, electronic files, and barcodes. "A file can be forgotten, but evidence must not disappear," she said, "because every story begins and ends there." After the conference, Vermont announced it would adopt the long-term evidence vault model based on Maine's Bangor storage, while New Hampshire began implementing the DNA Revival 2020 project, allowing retesting of old evidence with STR and YSTR technology. The press called this the federal Montrose effect. For Maine itself, the case transformed the entire structure of the cold case squad. Previously, the unit consisted of only 6 people, 3 investigators, 2 forensic specialists, and 1 data analyst. By mid-2014, the budget doubled, allowing expansion to 12 members, along with 2 new positions at the state DNA lab. Director Connors stated at the announcement ceremony, "After Montrose, no one doubts the value of the cold case squad. They don't just solve cases, they preserve the belief that truth can always be found, even if it takes 30 or 50 years." Police schools in the state also incorporated the Montrose case into mandatory curricula for criminal training, a specialized module titled The Science of Persistence. The Science of Persistence was compiled by Rachel Kearney herself. She emphasized that the most important factor is not just technology, but the attitude of the file holder. Each paper file is a life not yet given the last word. If you forget them, you're letting the crime live on. In the 2 years following the sentence, the cold case squad reopened 37 files, of which 6 were fully solved thanks to DNA techniques, a record number for a small state like Maine. The FBI released a special report praising the Montrose case as one of the most notable long-term case achievements in America in the 2010s. Also in 2015, at the annual conference of the National Association of Chiefs of Police Maine, was awarded the Investigative Integrity Award for the Best Evidence Preservation System in the New England region. The bronze plaque was engraved with the line, "For preserving truth through time, Lisa Montrose case." On the day of receiving the award, Kearney stepped onto the podium in a simple gray suit, eyes bright and voice calm. "I don't think I represent victory," she said. "I only represent those not yet found. We do this not for the past, but for the future, to ensure no more files lie silent in dust." For 34 years, the hall stood and applauded. In that moment, everyone understood that the Lisa Montrose case had transcended a small-town scope. It had become a milestone for the entire U.S. criminal investigation field. Proof that technology can restore justice, and memory, if preserved properly, can live forever in every drop of dried blood remaining from a winter night in 1979. December 2013, snow began falling on Camden again, thick and silent, like the first night of the case, 34 years ago. In the Maine DOJ electronic database, the final status line of file Camden 79-341 was updated. Status, closed, solved. Case Montrose, Lisa. A concise sentence, but it took over 3 decades to write. At the Cold Case Squad office in Augusta, Detective Rachel Kearney was the one to sign the final confirmation. When the screen displayed closed, she sat still for a long time, looking at the blinking characters as if closing a door in her mind. "It's really over," she whispered, voice small enough only for herself to hear. The next day, Lisa Montrose's body, the bone fragments that lay still under the woods for 34 years, was brought back to Camden for burial. The funeral took place on a cold morning, overcast sky, salty sea wind blowing ashore. The small cemetery on the hill overlooking the bay, where people could see the old wooden bridge, now just a rotten frame amid white snow. A small wooden coffin, covered with the old red wool scarf that had been cleaned, was placed amid old pines. No trumpets, no crowds, only family, a few cold case team members, and some Camden residents who participated in the 1979 search. As the priest read the farewell, Kearney bowed her head, hand gripping Lisa's silver necklace she once found around the neck bone. In the wind, the priest's voice rang trembling. "She has come home, after 34 winters." After the ceremony, the Camden mayor, along with state police representatives, held a small memorial by the bridge. At the very spot where that year's snow once covered Lisa's last footprints, they erected a white-painted wooden plaque, deep black engraved letters, Lisa Montrose, never forgotten. Below a smaller line, justice found her after 34 years. Town residents brought bouquets, a few old photos, and handwritten notes. We still remember. Camden kept its promise. A child asked his mother, "Who was she?" The woman bent down, sad smile, "A girl who once got lost, dear. And today she's been found." In the afternoon, as the memorial ended, Kearney stood alone by the bridge. Snow fell thicker, cold wind blowing through the bare wooden frame, making a moaning sound, like the past sigh. She touched the newly erected plaque, cold spreading through her fingertips. In that moment, all the months she read files, long nights before faded Polaroids, times waiting for DNA results, all dissolved in the freezing breath. She pulled a small paper from her coat pocket, written in blue pen, for Lisa, whose silence changed everything. She folded it, placed it under the plaque, amid white flowers. That evening, back in Augusta, Kearney received an email from the DOJ, the Montrose case, officially transferred to historic solved case, #45, permanently archived in the system. She read this line, then turned off the screen, leaning back in her chair. Outside the window, snow covered the empty street, lights reflecting on the white expanse. At the same time in Camden, residents said someone lit a small candle by the bridge, right under the memorial plaque. The weak flame burned through the windy night, refusing to go out. 34 years ago, police once noted in the preliminary report, possible accident, fall into river. Now that note was replaced by another, bold in the new file. Homicide confirmed, justice served. Lisa Montrose had been found, justice restored, and Camden, the small coastal town haunted by the past for decades, could finally breathe in peace. Snow still fell on the old bridge, but this time, no longer chilling. News of Jack Thorne's sentence spread across Maine like a late-season cold wind. In Rockland, where he lived nearly 10 years after retirement, residents were still in shock. To them, Thorne was the local hero, a dedicated officer who once helped find lost children, supported the poor, and was an active Veterans Club member. But now, his photo on the old headquarters honor wall had been removed, leaving a bare gap amid other pictures. The day the sentence was announced, Bangor Daily News ran a large headline on the front page. "Arrest shocks coastal community." The article opened with a concise sentence, "A man once praised as a model of duty and honor turned out to be the one who buried a young girl under Maine snow for 34 years. On social media, residents split into two camps, one still trying to believe Thorne innocent, the other seeing it as belated proof of fairness. "I can't believe he did it," a neighbor wrote. "But if DNA spoke, we have nothing left to argue." In Camden, where it all began, the atmosphere was more somber. The once peaceful small town now saw crowds at the old wooden bridge, where the new Lisa Montrose, never forgotten, memorial plaque stood. They brought flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Many didn't know Lisa, but all felt the need to come. An elderly man whispered while bowing before the plaque, "I lived through this whole case. When young, I thought she just got lost somewhere. Now I know, the truth was just waiting for the ice to melt." A week later, St. Mary's Church in downtown Camden held an official memorial for Lisa. The church bells rang 34 times, each toll symbolizing a year she lay in the woods. Mayor, police chief, investigators, family, and ordinary residents, all present. Detective Rachel Kearney sat in the back row, silent. When the priest spoke of a solved case not only closing for the victim, but opening for the community a new faith in justice, she quietly bowed her head. After the service, an elderly woman, Lisa's mother, approached her, her hair fully white, eyes deeply marked by time. She gripped Kearney's hand tightly. "Thank you for not giving up. You brought my daughter home." Kearney couldn't speak, just nodded. In that moment, the cold years, long nights in old file rooms, all fatigue vanished. That evening, in Rockland, local TV replayed a short news clip on the case. Images of young Thorne in police uniform, interspersed with the latest photo of him in orange inmate garb. The anchor spoke slowly. A man once tasked with protecting the community ended up keeping that community from sleeping peacefully for 3 decades. But now, Camden can rest. Many schools in the area used the Montrose case as a lesson on professional ethics and forensic science value. At the University of Maine, where Lisa once studied, the criminology department opened a special course titled Justice in the Cold, recounting the investigation journey. Students read files, reviewed scene photos, and heard Kearney present. She told them, "No case is truly cold, only people give up searching." At year's end, Maine DOJ released a short documentary, Cold Case #45, The Lisa Montrose Story. The film opened with images of Camden Bridge in snow, whistling wind, and calm narrator's voice. One winter night in 1979, a girl vanished. And it took over 34 years, a strand of hair and a drop of dried blood to speak the truth. The film aired repeatedly, each time silencing viewers across the state. No one thought that, in a small place like Camden, one could witness a case changing how forensics and police approach justice. Early January the next year, as snow began melting, flowers around the memorial plaque still fresh. Each morning, someone cleared snow, placed a new candle. Online, a Portland Press Herald article concluded with a line seen as farewell to the Montrose case, 34 years, a strand of hair and a confession. In Maine, winters are long, but truth emerges when ice melts. In the pale light of approaching spring, the old wooden bridge still stood, no longer a place of loss, but a symbol of faith that even if waiting a lifetime, truth will find its way back. Looking from America today, the Maine 1979 story reminds us that justice doesn't come on its own. It's built through persistent communities, transparent authorities, and properly invested science. Lisa Montrose disappeared on Camden's wooden bridge in the 1979 snowy night. 34 years later, a blood-soaked red wool scarf, DNA wood fragment, and old map in Jack Thorne's home led investigators to the truth. Practical lessons for us: 1. When a loved one loses contact, report immediately and note details of timeline, route, items. Small facts like a keychain or shoe shape the investigation direction. 2. Respect and protect the scene. In this case, perfect evidence chain of custody. Let STR DNA and CODIS speak after decades. In everyday life, that translates to not tampering with accident-sentence scenes and proactively providing photos, videos, location data to police. 3. Don't sanctify authority. Thorne was once an exemplary officer in Rockland. Thus, healthy skepticism and oversight of power is necessary, respecting law enforcement while demanding accountability. 4. Invest in community science from ground-penetrating radar to DNA labs. Scientific infrastructure is justice's backbone. At local level, supporting budgets for labs, cold case programs, and file digitization is a practical way to protect one's family. 5. Remember and Heal. The Lisa Montrose Never Forgotten plaque not only commemorates the victim, it teaches children how to face truth. In a vast country with long winters, the best we can do is preserve evidence, speak up early, and believe that when ice melts, truth will emerge, if we persistently seek it. Thank you for following the journey to restore justice for Lisa Montrose, a story that reminds us that the truth, no matter how long buried, will eventually be revealed. Please subscribe to the channel to join me in continuing to explore cases thought to have slumbered forgotten, where justice always finds its way back to the light.